Hi, my name is Sara Schmitt and I'm a PROTECT researcher and research assistant at the University of Stuttgart, and I will be presenting today on the topic of media and migration, how international protection is covered in public discourse. For that purpose, I want to focus on two research goals. The first one is to identify the presence or absence of a global cleavage system in newspapers and news agencies, and I will be focusing on UK and Germany as the two cases. The second goal is to detect changes in the discourse based on political and migration-related events. But this will be for the live presentation, and for this part of the presentation, for this video presentation, I will be focusing on the first goal. We are basing this research on a theoretical framework put forward by Hakan Sichakan, who conceptualizes a global political cleavage system of international protection. And in this theoretical framework, global political cleavages and their corresponding discourses can be discerned by three criteria. The position on the particularism-universalism continuum, the view of what the natural political unit is, and the stance on role and power of political institutions at different levels. Based on these three criteria, we can discern 5 different cleavage discourses. Nativists who believe that they can privilege themselves over others. They believe that the natural political unit is defined by the people's ancestral territory and want to exclude all foreign actors, oppose international obligations and cooperation. Nation status believe that the historically formed nation states are the natural political unit and want to exclude international organizations and foreign actors, but might be open to some multi or bilateral cooperation. Regionalists believe that the supranational regional polity is the natural political unit and want to give more power to these institutions than international organizations. And human rights globalists and market globalists believe that all humans are equal and that it should be a global multi-level polity and want to increase power of international institutions. And market globalists also believe in private sector involvement. To further conceptualize these discourse categories and make them more easy to operationalize in the context of quantitative text analysis, it is helpful to think of these discourse categories as discerning between the self and the other in the global political cleavage system. So nativist self would be members of the own ethnic group, and the other would be all other supranational and international institutions and elites. For nation status, the self would be members of the own nation state, and the them would be irregular migrants and supranational and international institutions and elites. For regionalists, the self are members of the own supranational entity, for example, the European Union, and the them would be irregular migrants and anti-regionalist views. And for human rights globalists, the self are all humans and their common global institutions, and the other are refugees from a human rights perspective, which are seen as the victims, and also nationalist and right-wing views. And for market globalists, equally, all humans and their common global institutions are the self, but from a global market perspective, and refugees are the other, but from a market perspective. This theoretical conceptualization is then analyzed with the means of a quantitative content analysis, and quantitative content analysis has some advantages. It makes it possible to analyze large amounts of text, utilize the whole discourse by media, not only selected timeframes and actors, and quantify the importance of topics in the discourse, and it also makes it more easily reproducible. Because we are particularly interested in the presence or absence of our theoretical categories in the media discourse, we chose a dictionary approach, which is a word list for each theoretical category that we are interested in. This has the advantage that we can use theory-derived word lists to detect the occurrence of a concept in the text, and is a deductive approach. It is also easily or more easily qualitatively validated, and it's problem specific. However, it omits linguistic change and structure because we are using word lists to detect the frequency of a concept in the text. So we designed a word list for each of the cleavage categories to detect them in our data. Okay, so I want to say a few words about the data as well. The data was collected via the event registry platform, which is a platform that contains newspapers and news agency articles in a lot of different countries. We used a search query that contained asylum-related and UN-related keywords in line with the goals of the project. As I mentioned before, I am focusing on the UK and on Germany in the time frame between 2014 and 2019. And in the UK, there is contained around 1,160 newspapers and news agencies with almost 250,000 articles. And for Germany, we have around 680 newspapers and news agencies with almost 900,000 articles for the same time frame. As you can see here, this is the number of articles in UK and Germany by month, and it's quite apparent that there are similar patterns of attention to this topic in both countries. Most notably, the spike in attention in late 2015, which can be attributed to the so-called refugee crisis, and it is also apparent that even after 2016, when the so-called refugee crisis was declared over, the attention never fully went down to the levels that it had before. I also wanted to highlight some example texts that illustrate the cleavage categories that we detected with our dictionary. So for example, in the nativist category, there's an article where it's about the deportation of an asylum seeker that committed a crime. And in the human rights globalists category example text, it is about the struggle of LGBT and refugees and migrants to gain recognition as refugees. And you can see that this indicates that the focus is highly different, and our word list is capturing the differences in the particularism, universalism continuum quite well. So I'm now moving on to some descriptive analyses with the leading question: is there a difference between mainstream media outlets with regard to their usage of the discourse categories in UK and Germany, and are there patterns of salience in the cleavages over time? I chose some sources based on their circulation and based on different ideological orientations. And here we can see the distribution for the UK. On the y-axis, there's the cleavage share over all words that are contained or captured by the cleavage dictionary. which means that 0.1 would indicate 10% share of this particular cleavage over all cleavages or words captured by the cleavage dictionary. And here we can see for the UK that there's quite a similar pattern for all newspapers, irrespective whether they are tabloid or broadsheet newspapers. However, there's a slight ideological pattern. For example, The Guardian, which is a center-left broadsheet newspaper, is slightly more human rights globalist and less nativist than others. Here we can see the same for the German media discourse, and we can see here that the distribution patterns are quite similar to the UK. However, the nativist category is slightly smaller in Germany than in the UK. But similar to the UK, the leftist and left-leaning newspapers have slightly more human rights globalist words, or use slightly more human rights globalist words than others. This just confirms the same pattern as it did in the UK. What we see here are the distributions of cleavages by year in the German and UK media. The darker blue is the German media and the lighter blue the UK media. And I'm also further distinguishing between the self and other subcategories, which I mentioned in the beginning in the theoretical framework, to just further differentiate these discourses. And we can see here that the self subcategory is for all of the discourse categories way less pronounced, which is at least partly due to how we sampled our data. We searched with keyword-based search for our data, so this is, we selected some articles with a keyword-based search, so this is probably due to that. But we can also see that there are quite similar high and low points per year for UK and Germany, signifying that the discourse was probably quite similar. And what we also saw already in the distributions by source is that the nativist category is a little more prevalent in the UK, and for example the human rights globalist discourse is slightly less prevalent in the UK than in Germany. To sum up, the distribution of cleavage categories appears to follow a very similar pattern across all sources. There is some slight ideological patterns for left-leaning papers especially, and both UK and Germany show a similar pattern of salience distribution by year, indicating very similar discourses and that they probably were a lot of the same issues that were important in the same time frame. And this, however, does not tell us anything about what impacts change in the discourse, and this is why we are focusing on some events that may have an impact on the discourse categories in the live presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I hope to see you at the live presentation.